All right, you guys seem to really enjoy the style of video that was a little bit more candid and vlog-like, and honestly, that's the sort of content I want to make. Just to keep it valuable for the people who aren't into that sort of shit, can you leave any questions that you have down in the comments, and I'll answer those on my next training video. So yeah, that's going to be the style going forward. If you have a question, if you have a burning question that you want me to answer, stick it down in the comments. I'll get back to it in the next video. If you want to train like me, you can get a free week of my programming down in the links below. All right, anyway, let's get in there. So I would love to hit a 130 clean and jerk today. And then as far as the talking component of the vid, I just want to talk a little bit about the subjectivity of training, because I think it's something that isn't discussed enough. It's definitely a topic that me and my mentor Jamie Smith love ranting and raving about, because especially in the optimal, even before people started obsessing over optimal science-based training, like just it's something as a whole in the evidence-based era of fitness that has been sorely missed. Embracing training as both equal parts art and science, or really, like I said, it sort of goes under the bracket of embracing the subjectivity of it all. But even if you're not here to get, fully subjectivity pilled today, hopefully I can sort of sell you that training isn't purely scientific and it's not purely quantitative either. And my clients are probably stronger than yours, so you can't just be like, oh, well, fuck, you're just, being really casual about training and stuff like that. Like, no, I train high performance athletes, and embracing subjectivity is, it can be a high performance lens as well. It's not just like this Gen Pop thing. Even though if you train Gen Pop, it's arguably even more important to embrace the subjective journey that is training. But if you want to sort of look at how sports science has changed over time, or especially the science of stress, again, I've ranted about it before in my What is Stress video, but we started out, especially in fitness or in more sports science, I guess, with this view of stress that it was a purely biological phenomenon. And that's because general adaptation syndrome was developed by Hans Selye, and he worked that out just by torturing rats and observing their response to stress. But rats don't have the developed brain that we do. Rats don't experience such sophisticated emotions, and rats don't have the sort of complex relationships that we have. And so that's why when you're observing the way a rat responds to stress, it's very different to the way a human will respond and interact with stress. And again, so why do I talk about stress so much? My view of it is that how we drive training outcomes is we have a very deliberate application of stress to a system, and it's the attenuation or management of that stress over time. Like, that's how we drive training outcomes. So just doing some deep tier split stance leaps, and then I've got some low ceiling leaps just to get the old knees and lower shank warmed up before we go into these heavy clean and jerks. I think the prescription was 4 sets of 6 each leg, but honestly, I'm not counting these. I'm just sort of doing it purely based off vibes. And so when we're looking at things from a stress lens, and that's one of our central governing principles, understanding this application of stress to a system, yeah, some aspects of the stress are objectively quantifiable, but then they're always interacting with things that are just fundamentally subjective. So, the objective dose of training stress would be 4 sets of 10 at 70 kilos or whatever the prescription is. That is fairly objective and fairly quantifiable. But then there's this human that has to do that workout, and that workout and that stress is inseparable from all the other things going on in their life, all these environmental and social factors. And not only are these things impossible to truly quantify, but it's impossible to measure or predict how they're going to interact with even the objective stresses that we're then applying to them in training. And this is why all the best strength coaches in the world are applying concepts that allow their clients or athletes to explore autoregulation, or using things like RPE-based strength training, RPE isn't just something that we use for strength training, it's something we can use to sort of govern a lot of our training decisions for all sorts of different qualities. And that's the thing, a lot of coaches probably use and apply RPE to their clients without even understanding all this stuff. So, it really depends how far you want to go down this rabbit hole, but I just think if you're one of these people that pretends that everything is objective in training and everything is super quantifiable, you're probably not understanding these concepts fully, and it is going to affect your application of them at some point, particularly if you're one of these wankers that wants to talk about what the optimal exercise is for triceps. You've completely missed the subjective nature of stress and training as a whole. All right, I'm gonna shut up about subjectivity for a second, hopefully rip this 130 kilo cleaner jerk, then I'll get back into explaining things while I hit my accessories. Sorry, I just realized I didn't fully land the plane on one of those thoughts there about just embracing the subjective components of stress. So you've got the outdated, purely biological view of things, general adaptation syndrome from Hans Selye. And then you've got like understanding allostasis, allostatic responses, or maybe more biopsychosocial view of stress, which again, you sort of trace back to George Engel was the guy who developed the biopsychosocial model, but then from a sports performance perspective, you're really looking at people like John Kiley in powerlifting, I guess, Mike Tuchscherer and the way he's embraced RPE-based strength training. And then maybe going back to sports performance, obviously John Kiley is a weapon of an S&C coach, embraces the subjectivity of things, but also people like Mladen Jovanovic, I think I would put under that bracket as well. Fuck yes! Fucking destroyed that jerk. All right, got pulled forward a little bit onto my toes a little bit too early in the clean pull there, but it's always a good sign where you can have a bit of a dodgy clean and then absolutely smoke the jerk. So while it might be optimal on paper or in theory to drag all this equipment halfway across the gym, to cuff yourself on every single cable exercise you do, it just subjectively ruins the training experience for so many people. Like if you're not having a good time training, you're just not going to try that hard, or your motivation to train is going to dwindle over time. And so much of the optimization you see through training content, it's really just performative. So I don't doubt that a lot of these science-based nerds subjectively enjoy setting up all these complex exercises, but it's mainly just so that they can make interesting content or have people look at them and think that they're doing something special when they're in the gym. Whereas for a lot of people who aren't naturally attracted to this sort of stuff, like I said, subjectively, it just stuffs up the whole training experience. And it's not just these 19 to 21-year-old TikTokers that are making this mistake. We even see it at the top level of sports science in our field. You're bloody like Brett Contreras and Menno Henselmans and whoever else keep funding these stupid squats versus hip thrust studies. And people take these studies seriously. They're like, oh my God, one of these is objectively better than the other. When, in my opinion, this is a complete misappropriation of sports science. Like, all we learnt from the repeated studying of squats versus hip thrust isn't that one is objectively better than the other. We've learnt that they both grow your glutes, and then it comes down to the individual and their subjective needs or wants, that how you actually find the optimal one. So sports science is never going to tell you how to write an optimal program, optimal dose of training, or even select an optimal exercise for your client. All it does is show us what works and what doesn't work. So then we're left with this bandwidth of good enough. How you find the optimal exercise is by actually individualizing it to your client's wants and subjective needs. Like, are you really telling me that if you go up to your female client, or like male clients do hip thrusts as well, but again, predominantly females tend to love that exercise because they can lift huge weights and it makes them feel like a badass. If you go up and lecture someone who's hip thrust, you're like, well, actually, we've done the research and we found out that squats are actually going to grow you an extra 2 millimeters on your glutes for the same amount of effort or whatever. They're not going to train squats as hard as what they train hip thrusts. So you're going to be wrong when it actually comes to the outcomes anyway. None of us are training statistical averages. So you really have to watch how you view and interpret all this sports science and all this data that we're ambushed with day in and day out. We'll go up a little bit, hopefully though. So yeah, the dose of stress is just such a governing principle for how we drive training outcomes. Stress, there's so many subjective components to. Most people aren't going to work that hard when they're subjectively not enjoying the training experience. And again, this is why optimal is really just a really shitty term for describing individualized or collaborative style program design, where you sit down, like I said, and you as the expert, you know the range of good enough and what's acceptable enough to actually drive results. How you optimize it, you sit down, work collaboratively with your client to find the right dose, the right training prescriptions in terms of exercise selection and all that sort of stuff. That's how you create buy-in, that's how you harness the power of subjectivity to drive positive training outcomes. And like, of course, I don't expect 19 to 21-year-old TikTokers to understand this, but I do expect older, more experienced trainers to start wrapping their heads around this shit. Stop the squats versus hip thrust studies. We're just wasting money at this point. We know both of them grow glutes. One of them's gonna grow your quads a little bit more as well. Again, that could help you with your decision-making process. But as far as which one's optimal, ask your client what one they enjoy more. They're gonna train it way harder. That's how you drive outcomes, okay? If you buy into the concept, it shouldn't be that controversial to suggest that if you train hard, you'll probably get good outcomes. How do you get people training hard? You write a program that they actually enjoy and are bought into. Screw your optimal exercises. There we go, that's better. Especially when it comes to educators in this industry, I've definitely got a much better grasp of, like, one of my strengths is understanding how art and science are two sides of the same coin. I think most coaches, when they say, oh, training's an art and a science, is like, that's just their way of explaining when they go off script and they can't explain why they got a good result with it. The artistic aspect of it to me is meeting the client where they're at, working collaboratively with them. Like, that's the art of training. I'm not saying, like, obviously we have to have a regard for quantitative data and the hierarchy of evidence. That stuff is important because it does give us our bandwidth of what works. But then the artistry as a coach, like I said, is understanding how to truly individualize that, build a relationship with your athlete over time so that then you can actually truly find the optimal program through individualization, not through strapping every single moving part of you to the pole when you're doing cable extensions. I don't think anyone's interested in watching me hit doubles at 140 kilos. Hope you enjoy the rant about subjectivity. If you want to learn more about this shit and you like the way I talk about training, check out the link for GPP Level 1 down below. It's one of the cheapest courses in the industry, and it's probably the best course available in the industry for personal trainers or strength and conditioning coaches. If you like the way I train, you can train the way I train, and you can get a free week of it down below as well. There's a link for that there. And if you're not in the mood to buy anything, go help yourself to a free program down below. Bye.